Well, good morning. We have a lot of guests with us today, and we're so glad that you're a part of our worship together and the things that we're going to study together this morning. There are several of you haven't got a chance to meet yet, but there's actually a great opportunity for all of us to get to know one another better today, because Marilyn's invited all of us to her house. And just right after services today, we're having a big potluck over at her place, and there'll be plenty for you to eat, and there'll be lots of opportunity for us to get better connected. And so if you're a guest with us today, I want you to know that you're welcome as we all get together. In fact, that's part of the purpose of it. It's not just for us to be together, but also an opportunity for us to get to know one another and to get to know you better. And so we hope that you'll be a part of that today. I want to invite you to the book of Luke this morning, the Gospel of Luke, and go to the 5th chapter of that Gospel, if you would. This is a familiar text for our people. We've been studying the life of Christ this whole year, in fact, and this is a text that we have looked at before. In fact, we looked at it Wednesday night, and so I want to look at it again this morning. It says in Luke's Gospel, chapter 5, verse 27, concerning Jesus, that after he went out, he noticed a tax collector or tax gatherer named Levi sitting in the tax office, and Jesus said to him, "Follow me." And Levi left everything behind and rose and began to follow him. And Levi gave a big reception for him, that is for Jesus, in his house, that is in Levi's house. And there was a great crowd of tax collectors and other people who were reclining at the table with them. And the Pharisees and their scribes began grumbling at his disciples, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with the tax gatherers and sinners?" And Jesus answered and said to them, "It's not those who are well who need a physician, but those who are sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." I want to look together this morning at the calling, Jesus' calling of Levi, because I think it models for us what the Lord's mission is for us, what He has called us to do and to be as those that would follow Him. Now, in talking about that mission, which I think is one thing, there is a singular mission that we are about as a people. There's actually two components that we're going to see that are a part of that mission that are modeled by Levi in the text, and I think is just tantamount. I mean, it's what it means to be a follower of Him. It means that if you are going to be behind Jesus, if He's going to be the Lord of your life, if He's going to be the leader of your life, if He's going to reign as your King, if your life is going to be God-centered, if it's going to be Christ-centered, if He's going to be sanctified in your heart, this is just what it looks like. And so Levi here, otherwise called Matthew, we read the same account in Matthew's Gospel and in Mark's. Levi here models for us what it looks like when you follow Jesus. The two parts, I want to go ahead and introduce those to you, that are shown by us here are first of all that the mission is to follow Him. Very simply, it's to follow Him. When Jesus encounters Levi sitting in his tax office, collecting taxes, He said, "Follow me," and Levi left his tax office, left everything behind, and he followed Him. That's the mission. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who you are this morning, what age you are in life, whether you're a teen or you're 20-something or 30-something or 40-something or 50-something or 60-something and 70-something. Do we have any 80-somethings here? Wherever you are, the mission's the same. It's to follow Him. Follow me, He said. There's a second component, though. Same mission. Hasn't changed. A second component is what Levi does next. Because Levi doesn't just follow Jesus, Levi also shares Jesus. And so we read about how Levi had a big reception. If you notice in verse 29 of the text, he had a big reception for Jesus in his home, and he invited many tax collectors and sinners into his home so that they could be there and so that they could get acquainted with Jesus. And so he has followed Jesus, and now he's sharing Jesus in the text. And I want to make a case this morning for how it is that both of those components go together. that following Jesus means sharing Jesus. And sharing Jesus means that we've got to follow Him if we're going to have any credibility in sharing Him with others. And I want to see how those two things are connected. First of all, let's talk about the business of following Him. That is the mission that never changes. And yet at the same time, it's a mission that's always changing. Because what following Him looks like when you're Reagan's age is different from what it looks like when you're Jason's age, but it's different from what it looks like when you're Flynn's age, and yet there's a sameness about what it means for all three of these men. And so the mission's the same, but what it looks like where you're sitting as opposed to where Levi's sitting is a little different depending on where you are in your station in life, depending about where you're sitting right now. That mission is changing. And it's going to be different for Jason next year. And it's going to be different for Reagan in 2 years. And it's going to be different for Flynn next week. And so there are changes that are always taking place in what that mission means, what following Him means right now. And yet at the same time, the mission's the same. Part of the reason why it's always changing is the mobility of it. I mean, following Him means that we're on the move, right? It means that we are not static. It means that we're not staying in one place. It means that we're going where He's going. It means that we're on the move. And so the terrain is going to change. And who we encounter is going to change. And the demands of the day are going to change what following Him means. And so because it's a mobile mission, there is necessarily a change that is built into that mission. But it's the same mission for all of us and for all time, whether we're following Him, if you were following Him then or if you're following Him now. There are some things that are the same about that in terms of what that looks like. So let me, you're not Levi. You're not a tax collector. You have what your occupation is, and you have your family, and you have your place in life, and you have your responsibilities. And so let me ask you, what does following Him look like for you right now? What does following Him look like for your place in life? What does following Him look like from where you sit right now? The model here is appropriate because Levi was sitting. You're sitting. So you're sitting in Levi's place. So what does following Him look like from where you sit? Well, here are some things that I want to say to you that are going to be the same for all of us if we're going to follow Him. Number one, there's going to be some discomfort that's involved in following Him. Matthew was sitting. When he followed Jesus, he wasn't sitting anymore, right? I mean, it meant getting up. It meant leaving that place. It meant that there was going to be some discomfort now. There was going to be some work, some effort. Not that there wasn't work that was involved and effort involved in the work he was doing, but there's going to be new work and new effort. There's going to be something different that's involved in this. And Matthew's going to be learning some things that he hasn't done before. There's going to be some discomfort that's involved in that. You know, any new work that I've ever done, and I'm sure it's the case for you too, involve that same thing. In most new jobs that I've ever done, there's been a follow me aspect to it. Mr. White was coming by our place on Cave Creek Road when I was a boy growing up, and I was out playing in the front yard with my Labrador Retriever. And Mr. White stopped in front of our house in his pickup truck, and he had a trailer he was pulling behind, and there were two good old boys that were in the back of the trailer, and they were headed down to his farm. And Mr. White said, "Hey boy, you want to go haul hay today?" Well, I didn't know. I had never hauled hay before. That was a new thing for me. And so I said, well, sure. And so I hopped in the back of the trailer along with the other couple of guys that were there, and we went down the road a little bit to the farm, and we hauled hay that day. But I didn't know what I was doing. And so when we got there, you know what they said? They didn't say this exactly, but they might as well have said, "They follow me." And so I went, and they showed me how you pick up a bale. And they taught me about, which side of the trailer you don't want to be on, because you don't want to be close to the green bales. Leave those for someone else. The heavy ones. And they showed me how to pick them up, and they showed me how to throw them on the trailer, and they showed me how to stack them. You see, following them meant going. Because following him means that there is a discomfort that's involved in the business of following him. Not only is it going to be the case that we're going to get uncomfortable, but it also means that there's going to be some things that we're going to have to let go of. Some things that you have to leave behind. And so when Levi, as the text tells us, when Jesus called him to come follow him, he left everything. And he went to follow him. There's some things right now, and it doesn't matter to me how long you've been following him. There are things right now that you need to let go of, that you're holding on to. There's some things that you need to leave. Is there not? I mean, are you a place in your life where you don't have to leave anything anymore? No, I mean, there are things that I'm thinking about that I need to stop thinking about. And there are things that I'm dreaming about that I've got to let go of. And there are things that I'm saying that I don't need to be saying anymore. And there are things that I'm doing that I don't need to be doing anymore. I need to learn to let go of them. And following him at every station in life means the same thing. It means that there's going to be some discomfort, and it means that I'm going to need to let go of some stuff. I'm going to have to leave some stuff behind. Now, what's that look like where you're sitting? What do you got to let go of? What have you got to leave? There is something that you need to let go of if you're going to follow him. There's a third aspect to this business of following him, and that's that there's going to be some awkwardness that's a part of that. Levi collects taxes. That's familiar. He knows how to do that. Now, that would be awkward for me, because I want people to like me. And so I have a hard time asking people for money. But Levi did that every day. He asked people for money. He collected money from people. And that was familiar to him. It was something that he did. But now there's new things that Levi is going to have to learn to do that are not going to be familiar to him, that are going to be awkward for him. Maybe one of the things that he did next in the text was one of the things that was awkward. And when you're doing things that are awkward, you feel awkward. You trip over your words, and you drop things. And you should have seen the first bales that I tried to throw up on the trailer. I wish that Mr. White had told me that I needed to go back and put on long breeches because I wore shorts that day. And my legs were raw by the time it was over with. There were things, that's awkward. It was awkward for several days. And it's going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward when you follow Jesus. And there are changes that all of us need to make at whatever station we are in life, that when we start stumbling through them, we're going to look a little foolish doing it because it's different, because it's changed, because it's new. And not only are we going to feel awkward in it, but we're also going to look a little foolish doing it. People are going to say, well, Levi, I was by your office the other day, and they told me you quit. What's up with that? Told me you just left your job, and were you not making enough money? I mean, it looked like a good job. And so Levi is changing things, and people are scratching their head. They don't get why he's changing what he's changing, why he's hanging around with who he's hanging around with. Things are different about him. And when you are following him, it's going to be that way. You're going to feel uncomfortable, There's going to be some things that you got to let go of, and you're going to feel awkward and you're going to look awkward doing that. That's a part of what it means to follow Him. Can I give you Howard and Cindy are going to be mad at me, but could I give you an example among us? Ralph pointed this out to me a couple weeks ago. You know, Howard's always praying for God to use him up, for God to spend him in His service. You know, a few months ago, Howard was walking around, and then he broke his foot. And so then he was wheeling around on his little scooter, so that Flynn called him Scooter. And then he messed up his knee rolling around on the scooter, so that he was then on a walker. And he was putting too much weight on the knee, and it's going to make it worse, and so now he's in the wheelchair. Ralph said pretty soon, you know, Howard's going to be leaving pieces of him behind. Things are going to start dropping off of him, the way he spends himself. Now why is that? You know the solution to that? Howard, stay home. Cindy, quit pushing Howard around, quit going places. I mean, Howard's teaching, Cindy's teaching, they're going to the work release. We go to Opelika to go do a workshop down there, and Howard and Cindy are there. Howard sat down on the steps when we went to go eat that day. We went to a restaurant that had seating upstairs. We all wanted Howard and Cindy to be up there with us, not downstairs by themselves. And so Howard sat down on the steps, and he pushed himself up one step at a time and hurt his shoulder doing it. Now, that's foolish, isn't it? Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for Howard and Cindy to move from where they had a good home down on South Shadescrest. And what are you all doing moving, Howard? I mean, if they're going to move, they ought to go move and live with their kids, right? Or close to them or something like that. What are they doing moving at this stage in their life? I tell you, there's no sense to that unless they're kingdom reasons for the things that they do. But that's the deal, is there's kingdom reasons for the things that they do. And they don't make sense apart from the kingdom. If you take the Lord out of that, out of their decision making, it doesn't make one whit of sense at all. It seems so foolish. But when you understand what's behind the decisions that they make, then it makes total sense. They're following. And that's what following looks like for Howard. It's what following looks like for Cindy. I believe part of the reason the Lord brought them to Chelsea is to show us what it looks like to follow Jesus. Because they are busy being disciples. Now, tell me, what does that look like where you sit? What discomfort? What it doesn't look like is sitting still. What it doesn't feel like is sitting still. Following means moving. Following means changing. Following means growing. Following means that it is Scott Junkin uphill, right? It's not downstream. Following means against the current. And that's what following looks like. There's another part to the mission, besides just the follow part. The next part is the share part. Now, here is what I'm worried about in terms of communicating the fact that this is one mission. That we separate those two things too much. That we don't see that there is inherent in the following sharing. That sharing and following go together. Because tell me, what did Jesus do? I mean, where was He going that He's inviting Levi to come along? Is He not going to share? Is he not going to sow? And so what He's inviting Levi to do is to come sow with him, to come share with him in the work, to come participate in the field along with him. And so inherent in the following is doing what Jesus does. He has invited us along, and so it's part of following him is that we're inviting others along too, to come participate with us in what we're participating in. And so the two things go together. Now, it looks different depending upon where you are in the business of following him. Levi doesn't teach anybody in the passage that we can tell. But he knows the people. The tax collectors and the sinners that are coming into his home and that are dining with Jesus. They are his friends. And so that's what sharing Jesus looked like for him. It meant at that place in life that he knew a lot of people that needed to know Jesus. And so as he's getting to know Jesus, he's inviting them to come along and get to know Jesus along with him. Now, I don't read where Peter and James and John, where they invited anybody. Maybe they did. Maybe they had friends that came too. But Levi's the one that invited all the people, and he's the one that has the big house that he can hold them all. And so he's doing the thing that he can do, and that's what it looks like where he sat. Now, where does it look like where you sit? Maybe you're the one that has all the friends. Maybe you're the ones that has all the connections. But maybe you're the one that comes the way that Peter and James and John did and shows up to get to know the person that has all the friends, or to get to know the friends of the person that has all the friends. Maybe you're the one that can do some teaching or some sharing of truth while you're there. But I want you to see that it looks different depending on who you are, and yet there's a sameness that's about it. In the sense that we all share in the people work that God is doing in redeeming people, redeeming man, redeeming our friends, saving us, saving sinners, connecting to sinners, showing them his truth. And so those two things go together. Following him and sharing him. Now, what is interesting to me is that Jesus doesn't have to tell Matthew to do that. He doesn't tell Levi to do that. He tells him to follow me. But I want you to see that Levi makes the connection, because the next thing he does in following him after he leaves everything is he's sharing him. Now, I want to suggest to you that it ought to be just that natural a connection for us. That we don't see those as being two different things, but we see that as part of the whole mission. That it's just what life looks like when you're following him, is that you're sharing him. So Jesus doesn't say it. He didn't have to command Levi to share him. Levi just does that. He gets to know him, he follows him, and so he wants everyone else that he knows to follow him too. So he gets all the tax collectors and all the sinners that he knows, and he invites them to their house, to his house, because Jesus is in his house now. And maybe when they see that, and maybe when they experience that, then they'll want to follow him too, when they've seen what that looks like in Matthew's life. Sometimes we leave the sharing him until we get everything together. Do you think Levi had it all together when he started inviting all his tax collector friends and sinners over to his house? I don't think he had it all together yet. I mean, there's too much told on the disciples that they didn't have it all together. But do you see that part of getting it all together is sharing him? I mean, Jesus is going to say something in his sermon or in his lesson or when they're together, and somebody that is a friend of Levi is going to look over at him and say, "Did you hear that? You've done some of that. I know what you used to be, Levi. And you're not going to just change overnight." And some of those that show up at Levi's house are criticizing the people that are at Levi's house, the people that Levi has invited into his home, the people he's hanging out with. Now, I want you to see that the benefit that's a part of sharing him while we're following him, and that is that it brings some good accountability to our life if we're sharing him while we're following him. Not just accountability from the people that are following him too, but from the people that are not following him too. Because they expect that if you're following him, that you're going to look something like him. That if you're following him, that there's going to be some changing going on in your life, and there's changing going on in Levi's life, and people are seeing that, and they're holding him accountable for that. And that's a good thing for Levi. And so the sharing is good for the following. But do you see also that the changing that's going on in Levi's life is part of what makes his sharing so powerful? Because people are watching the changes that are going on in his life. And so the following is helping the sharing. Because they're seeing what following looks like as they're watching Levi become a different man before their very eyes, as they see this transformation taking place. And so the two things, the following and the sharing, are compatible. They just go naturally together. There's another aspect about how Levi is doing the sharing that we could learn from as well. What does sharing him look like? You know, what sharing him is not is this. It is not talking about sinners in the church. It's not talking about sinners in the synagogue. Now you see, that's what the scribes and the Pharisees, who are critics of this occasion, that's what they're doing. They're looking at all the people that are in Levi's house. And they know him. That guy's not, he's not in the synagogue. That guy didn't come Saturday. That guy over there, he didn't. I know how he's living. Now that is not what sharing him looks like. It doesn't look like talking about sinners in the church building. I mean, we can come here and we can wring our hands and we can talk about how bad it is out there. We can talk about how bad folks are out there. And that is not what sharing. Who am I sharing it with if I'm sharing that with you? If it's bad out there, then where do we need to be? We need to be out there. If folks are hurting out there and if folks are lost out there, then where do we need to be? We need to be out there. Because the Lord took the mission to the people. He went to where the people were. He went to where the people were that were sinners. He turned Matthew's living room into an ER. I mean, he made his home into a hospital. And sick people were coming there. People that were bad off. And they were being made better. And so it's not talking about the sinners. It's not talking at the sinners either. You can get your finger in somebody's face and you can tell them about the things that they need to change. And you're probably just talking to yourself, aren't you? Not that there's not times for reproof and for correction and for rebuke and all of those kinds of things. But I want you to see something about the posture that Levi adopts and that Jesus adopts all the time in his ministry. Jesus has taught those that are following him not to talk down to people. He's teaching them to talk up to people. And one of the ways that you can talk up to people is get them in your house. And it's a lot easier to talk to sinners, not about them and not at them, but to talk to them and talk with them when you're serving them supper. When you're helping. And so often Jesus, he taught the people things that were hard things. He taught them with authority, not like the scribes and the Pharisees. And the people were amazed because his teaching had teeth. It had guts to it. He told people about the changes that they really need to make in their life. But when he was talking to them about change, he was healing them. He was freeing them. He was helping them. And he was doing it out of his own means, out of his own pocket. And Levi's learning to do a little bit of the same. He's using who he is and where he is and what he has. And he's changing in his life now, but he's not talking down to his friends that he's left. He's talking up to them. They're in his house, and he's pouring them more iced tea. And he's getting them another roll. Because his home is different now. And he's brought them into a place where they can see the difference, because Jesus is in his home now. And if his friends can come in his home and see how it's different there, then they can see what following him really looks like. Because they're not going to see what it looks like just in the synagogue. They're not going to see what it looks like just here. They need to see what it looks like in life. They need to see what it looks like in choices. They need to see what it looks like in prioritizing. They need to see what it looks like in hospitality. They need to see what conversation of those that are connected to Jesus, what it sounds like. And what relationship looks like when people are surrendered to Jesus. They need to experience what having friends that have Jesus in their life, what that feels like. And we have in our own fields, in our own relationships, we have the means to do that too as we're following Him. To share Him. And part of sharing Him is us getting creative and thoughtful about how our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, how can they experience what it means to be following Jesus? What it means to have friends that are following Jesus? What it means to have a home where Jesus is present? And if I can get them connected to that, then the truth that makes that happen, the truth that makes that so, the truth that motivates and that informs that kind of change, it starts to click. And Levi is doing that for those that he's following. Now, those that he's sharing Jesus with. Now, could I say to you that this is what that's going to look like too? It's going to be uncomfortable, sharing Him. Because all of a sudden, Levi's home is overrun with all these people. And it's not only going to look uncomfortable, but it's also mean that you're going to have to let go of some stuff. I mean, that cost some money, did it not? I mean, Levi is spending his own resources. He's letting things go because he's now partners with Jesus in this work. And so there's stuff that he's letting go of in that. There's an awkwardness that's about it because there are people that he's introducing to Jesus who do know what he used to be. And so there's no veneer here. There's no make-believe. They know him. They know what he's been. So there's awkwardness that's a part of that, and there's foolishness that's a part of all of that. And so you see again that there's a synergy between following Him and sharing Him, because all of the same experiences are a part of it. The uncomfortableness, the awkwardness of it, the foolishness of it, the letting go part of all of it. Now, here's what happens if we don't do that. If we follow Him, but we don't share Him, then there's going to be one of two consequences that will come if we follow and don't share. First of all, if we don't do that, if we just follow and we don't share, then we will probably trade our old sins for new ones. This is what I mean. We'll trade what we used to be for just being self-righteous. We'll trade what we used to be for just being hypocritical. We'll treat our public sins for private sins, for secret sins. We'll trade the fact that we used to be selfish and just doing for ourselves for the fact that we are still selfish, but we feel good about our selfishness because we cleaned it up. But we're still not doing for others. We still don't feel compassion. So we'll either trade our old sins for worse sins, or, secondly, we'll get comfortable with living between two worlds. What I mean by that is that we'll follow Jesus when we're here and together. And then we will, not that we're living sinners, not that we're living in a way that would be divorced from religion in other people's eyes, but we won't be bringing him into the workplace. We won't be bringing him into the neighborhood. We won't be bringing him into our family. We'll live between two worlds in the sense that we'll get together here and then we'll just go about our business through the week, and Jesus isn't connected to our connections to people. And so we'll live between, just like the scribes and the Pharisees did, we'll live between two worlds where we feel good about our religion, but where we're not making a whit's difference in the world around us. Where we've really not followed Him into the mission. We've not followed Him into the field. We're not changing anybody. And if we're not changing anybody, we're not changing ourselves. I just want to persuade us that the two things go together. Now, wherever you are in your relationship with Jesus today, the mission is the same. I mean, if you have not committed to following Him yet, Jesus wants you to come follow Him. He wants you to get uncomfortable for Him. He wants you to let go of whatever it is that's keeping you, that you're holding on to, that you can't carry with you if you want to follow Him. He's wanting you to feel awkward for Him because He felt mighty awkward for us, as Flynn said, when He was on the cross. He wants us to look foolish for Him. Now, He wants you to do that. And while you're following Him, He wants you to share Him. To open your home, to spend your money, to look silly, to have your friends who used to hang with you, who used to sin with you, to see that you're changing. He wants you to bring them too. Now, they may or may not choose to follow, but the call is the same. And if you've been following Him for a long time, from where you sit, what does following Him look like for you now? What does it mean doing differently? What does sharing Him look like for you now? Because we have one mission. And that one mission has two parts that are at once different and yet the same. It's to follow Him. And then to invite others along to follow Him too. That's our charge today. Will you commit to that? Will you? Let's follow Him. Let's share Him. Let's do that together. Maybe we'll do it better if we do it together, shall we? If you're ready to follow Him today, then won't you come? Let us help you. Let us encourage you. Let us lift you. He did that for us. Why don't you come follow Him too, while together we stand and as we sing.